The fluorescent lights hummed softly in the quiet ICU, casting long, wavering shadows across the polished linoleum floors. Dr. Michael Harper had walked these corridors countless times, seen countless children fighting battles their small bodies were never meant to endure. But that night, everything felt different. He paused outside room 214, drawn by a sense of urgency that had nothing to do with the monitors or alarms. Inside, Emma lay in her hospital bed, so small, so fragile, yet somehow entirely alive in a way that defied the machine surrounding her. Her cheeks were pale, her arms thin, veins tracing delicate lines beneath translucent skin, yet her eyes sparkled with something that made the doctor pause, made him forget the severity of her condition for a heartbeat. "I'll be back tomorrow," she whispered, almost playfully, her voice barely more than a breath. A smile tugged at the corners of her lips, a knowing expression that unsettled Dr. Harper more than he wanted to admit. How could a 7-year-old, tethered to IVs, attached to monitors that recorded the slow betrayal of her body, speak with such confidence about a tomorrow she might never see? The words hung in the air, absurd and profound all at once, echoing in the quiet rhythm of the ICU. Nurses glanced at one another, cautious not to disturb the fragile balance of hope and despair that always existed here, while her mother sat beside her, fingers entwined in Emma's tiny hand, tears glossing over a forced smile. The machine's eeps punctuated the silence, a metronome of life and fragility, and yet in that room, time seemed to suspend itself. Dr. Harper felt the weight of it, the heavy contradiction of the child's courage and the relentless clinical certainty of her disease. He had seen children defy odds, cling to hope, and fight valiantly, but this was different. There was a certainty in her eyes, a calm that felt almost otherworldly. It was as if she had glimpsed a truth beyond the reach of medicine, beyond the sterile walls lined with monitors and IV poles. Outside the room, shadows stretched long across the corridor, whispers of nurses exchanging updates drifting faintly into the hallway. The night felt alive with a strange tension, the kind that makes one pause mid-step and question everything they thought they knew about life, about death, about the fragile threads in between. Dr. Harper leaned against the doorframe, silent, heart tightening with a mixture of disbelief and awe. Could this be a fleeting moment of childlike optimism, the kind born from innocence and courage? Or was there something more, something unexplainable in the quiet strength of a child who had seen more of the world's cruelty than anyone should at 7 years old? He watched her, listened to the soft rhythm of her breathing, and felt an ache settle in his chest. A mixture of admiration, sorrow, and fear. There was no room for certainty here, only questions, only the unrelenting weight of a tiny life hanging in balance. And then, everything changed. Emma's whispered promise lingered in the air like a fragile ghost, impossible to ignore, impossible to rationalize. It would haunt him, the echo of those words, for nights to come, challenging the boundaries of science and the limits of hope. In that instant, the audience is pulled into a world of tension and wonder. They see the fragility of life, the bravery of a child, and the unnerving mystery of words that seem impossible yet entirely real. They're left with a single, haunting thought. How could someone so small, so vulnerable, speak with such certainty about a tomorrow that no one could guarantee? Emma's journey had begun months ago, though for her family, the memory of the day of diagnosis remained as sharp as a knife. Pediatric leukemia, a word that carries a weight no parent ever wants to bear. The narration explains it simply. Leukemia attacks the bone marrow, the body's factory for blood cells, leaving the immune system dangerously weakened. Fatigue settles like a heavy fog. Fevers flare unpredictably, and the small body fights a battle that the mind struggles to comprehend. For Emma, even a short walk across the hospital corridor could leave her winded, her tiny frame trembling under the effort. Through home videos and photos, the audience sees her life before the hospital became her constant reality. A world of playgrounds, birthday candles, and laughter that seemed endless. Then the hospital arrives, a new kind of world, one of sterile rooms, endless beeping monitors, and the persistent sense of antiseptic.
Days blend into nights, each filled with chemotherapy sessions that strip energy as if from an invisible thief. Dr. Harper recounts the countless procedures, needles, blood draws, transfusions, and the unrelenting tide of tests designed to track every detail of her fragile existence. Yet Emma endured. Her bravery was evident not only in survival, but in her spirit. She laughed at jokes that fell flat, played card game with visiting nurses, and sometimes allowed herself moments of childish rebellion, drawing on her chart with markers that she wasn't supposed to touch, hiding her socks just to make her mother look for them. There were moments of despair too, times when nausea and pain seemed unbearable, when hope felt dangerously thin. Her parents' voices tremble when they recall nights spent hovering over her bed, feeling her tiny hands grasp theirs with a desperation that words could not capture. The cinematic storytelling immerses the audience in these moments. Close-ups of her small hand clutching her mother's, the rhythmic beeping of monitors, the sharp contrast between the child's laughter and the cold sterility of the hospital environment. Nurses share quiet reflections, Emma's humor, her stubbornness, and the moments when she defied even the doctor's expectations. Each scene underscores the cruel paradox of pediatric oncology, the resilience of a child set against the relentless progression of a disease that knows no mercy. By the end of this section, the audience understands why her words, whispered later in that ICU bed, carry such profound weight. The stakes are clear, the battle undeniable, and the promise she made, "I'll be back tomorrow," becomes almost unbearable in its poignancy.
The morning sunlight filtered softly through the blinds of room 214, casting narrow stripes of light across the sterile hospital floor. Emma stirred in her bed, her small body unusually animated for someone whose energy had been so painfully rationed over the past months. Dr. Harper had walked in expecting the quiet, measured motions of a child weighed down by illness, expecting a hesitant smile, perhaps a weak greeting. Instead, he found Emma laughing. Light, genuine laughter that seemed almost impossibly bright in the muted glow of the hospital room. She traced circles on her chart with a crayon, singing a made-up song that fluttered through the air like a fragile bird. "It's going to be okay," she said, not to anyone in particular, but with a certainty that made Dr. Harper pause. And then, with a mischievous sparkle in her eyes, she leaned toward him and whispered, "I'll be back tomorrow." The words hung there, weightless yet impossible to ignore, as though carrying a promise from somewhere far beyond the hospital walls. Her mother's hand tightened over Emma's small fingers, a nervous laugh escaping her throat. Nurses observing from just outside the doorway exchanged glances, the mixture of disbelief and the subtle awe unspoken but palpable. Cinematic imagery captures every detail. The slow motion of Emma tossing a marker across the bed, the subtle shifts in sunlight falling over her face, the faint thrum of the hospital's life-giving machines underscoring each movement. The scene stretches time in the narration, allowing the audience to feel the eerie tension that seemed to wrap around that room. Emma moved with a quiet authority, talking to the nurses about imaginary friends, making predictions about who would win a simple board game later that day. It was an unusual combination of childlike playfulness and an unsettling certainty that left adults uneasy, questioning whether she was simply spirited or glimpsing something beyond comprehension. Her parents' voices recount the surreal nature of that day, the mix of hope, fear, and the surreal weight of impending loss. They describe moments of laughter that felt almost too bright, fleeting glances that seemed to hold secrets, and a sense that the universe had shifted slightly in their presence. Even the hospital staff felt it, a delicate balance of optimism and dread that no one could explain. Dr. Harper recalls stepping outside the room briefly, catching his reflection in a window, seeing a doctor who was trained in science, but faced now with something that challenged every assumption he had ever held about life and death. The morning slipped forward in a montage of routine, medications administered, vitals checked, nurses bustling quietly, and Emma engaging with each person in the room as though orchestrating a subtle symphony of presence and attention. And yet, beneath the mundane clinical reality, the whispers of something unexplainable lingered.
Emma's words, "I'll be back tomorrow," became a refrain in Dr. Harper's mind, a haunting echo that refused to be dismissed. It was both ordinary and extraordinary, a child's promise tethered to a reality that made no guarantees, a line between life and the unknown drawn in the still air of that hospital room. By midday, the world outside continued in oblivious rhythm, but inside room 214, time felt suspended. Emma's laughter, the quiet beeping of monitors, the rustle of sheets and scribbled drawings, each detail imprinted on everyone present with a surreal intensity. The audience, fully immersed in the cinematic vision, senses the premonition without understanding it. They feel the tension, the eerie anticipation, and the lingering question that refuses to be answered. Was this innocent optimism, the spark of a child's imagination, or something far deeper, something that defied explanation and hinted at a consciousness beyond the grasp of science? By late afternoon, the fragile rhythm of room 214 began to falter. What had started as a bright morning, filled with Emma's laughter and teasing remarks, shifted suddenly into a quiet tension that no one could ignore. Dr. Harper watched her pallor deepen, her small chest rising and falling with increasing effort. The monitors, which had been a steady heartbeat of life, began to signal warning, sharp, urgent beeps cutting through the otherwise calm room. Her white blood cell counts had dropped dramatically, an infection silently spreading, unnoticed until it struck with brutal speed. The fragility that had always hovered at the edges of Emma's life now demanded attention in a way that was impossible to ignore. Nurses rushed in, voices measured yet tense, as IV lines were adjusted and medications administered. Dr. Harper's training took over, his mind racing through protocols, doses, and the rapid calculation of risks. But even as expertise guided each move, there was a helplessness that science could not erase. Each intervention was a plea, a fragile attempt to hold back the inevitable, to stave off the darkness that seemed to be creeping ever closer. Her parents clung to her sides, their tears mingling with whispered reassurances, their hands trembling as they tried to lend their child strength. The camera lingers on the tight clasp of hands, the way her mother's knuckles whiten, the way her father's lips press silently against her forehead, a portrait of love and desperation that words cannot capture. The cinematic tension builds with every heartbeat. Alarms echo through the corridor, footsteps fall in urgent rhythm. Shadows stretch long across the floor. The sterile walls of the ICU seem suddenly suffocating, filled with the weight of unspoken fears. Dr. Harper and the nurses move with precision, a dance of life-saving measures executed under the watchful eyes of destiny. Every action is deliberate, every second a precious chance to tick the balance. Yet, there is an unspoken understanding among them. Medicine, for all its power, has limits. The human body is stubborn, unpredictable, and sometimes cruelly finite. Emma's small form begins to weaken visibly, her eyes fluttering, her breathing shallow. The doctor's voices are calm, clinical, yet each word carries a tension that betrays the enormity of the moment. Parents whisper, trying to keep hope alive, to anchor their child in love even as the unrelenting reality presses in. There is a heartbreaking contrast here. The child who spoke so confidently of tomorrow, now suspended on the fragile line between life and death. And then, in the silence that follows frantic intervention, it becomes clear. Emma's energy wanes, her body giving way despite every effort, despite the love and science arrayed around her. The contrast between her earlier promise and this stark reality cuts deeper than any medical report could convey. Emotion washes over the room, grief, sorrow, and the unbearable knowledge that life is both precious and fleeting. For Dr. Harper, for the nurses, and for her family, this is a moment that will linger forever, haunting every quiet corridor and empty room, a reminder of how fragile life can be, and how fleeting hope sometimes proves to be. The room was silent now, save for the soft hum of machines left running and the faint, rhythmic breathing of grief itself. Emma was gone. And yet, the air seemed charged, almost alive, as if the walls themselves remembered the bright energy that had once filled the space. Dr. Harper stood by the bedside, exhausted, his hands trembling despite years of experience. It was then that he noticed the first of the unexplainable signs. Her favorite stuffed rabbit, a warm plush toy she had held for years, sat upright on the pillow where her head had rested, though no one had moved it. The nurses confirmed it hadn't been moved. A chill settled over the room, but no one spoke. They simply stared, the boundaries between grief, disbelief, and wonder blurring. The monitors, usually predictable and precise, recorded anomalies that defied explanation. Numbers flickered briefly, stabilizing almost instantly, patterns that no one could account for. Machines that measured life itself seemed to respond to an unseen presence, as though the energy of the child had lingered in the sterile air. Her parents, too, sensed it. They spoke quietly of subtle movements in the room, a shadow that shifted against the wall, the faintest echo of laughter, the sense that Emma's gaze lingered even when her eyes were closed forever. It was not frightening, it was oddly comforting, a quiet assertion that she remained in some way with them. Cinematic visuals capture the haunting atmosphere, empty corridors stretching into shadow, the soft glow of bedside lamps, the quiet hush of a hospital that feels both sacred and eerie. Staff move silently, almost reverently, as if afraid to disrupt the delicate balance of the moment. Interviews with nurses revealed their internal struggle, blending rational skepticism with awe. They described the profound sense of calm in the midst of expected chaos, a peace that seemed to radiate from a place beyond medical understanding. Even the most seasoned doctors felt it, an acknowledgement that science could explain much, but not everything. The narration emphasizes the tension between what is measurable and what is felt. Emma's whispered promise, "I'll be back tomorrow," takes on a new weight, hinting at a presence that cannot be quantified. It challenges the assumptions of medical certainty, leaving those present to wrestle with questions that have no answers. Could this be coincidence? The mind's attempt to find order in the quiet aftermath. The hospital seemed almost suspended in reflection. The corridors that once echoed with hurried footsteps now felt contemplative, heavy with the memory of Emma's presence. Dr. Harper sits in a dimly lit office, his eyes distant as he recounts the emotional toll of pediatric oncology. He speaks not only of Emma, but of the countless children whose lives are measured in fragile increments of hope. Sleepless nights, moral dilemmas, and the constant balancing act between clinical detachment and empathy shape the lives of those who care for children on the edge. The narration paints a cinematic portrait of a medical team wrestling with the limits of knowledge, the weight of responsibility, and the echoes of a child who left an indelible mark. Nurses recall Emma with a mix of sorrow and reverence. They describe her humor, her stubbornness, and her uncanny moments of insight that defied simple explanation. One nurse whispers that she could feel Emma's presence in the room even after her passing, a quiet calm that contrasted sharply with the chaos that might have been expected. Another recounts seeing the stuffed rabbit upright on the bed, a subtle but unforgettable sign that lingered in the mind long after the machines were silenced. Their reflections are intimate, humanizing, revealing the emotional layers of a profession often misunderstood by those outside its walls. The audience is drawn into these internal landscapes, feeling admiration, empathy, and a creeping sense of mystery. Dr. Harper reflects on the paradox of science and wonder. He explains that medicine is rooted in logic, evidence, and repeatable outcomes, but experiences like Emma's challenge these boundaries. Cinematic sequences show empty playrooms bathed in soft afternoon light, hallways lined with silent machines, and archival footage of children at play, juxtaposing innocence and clinical precision. The narration emphasizes that moments of inexplicable phenomena, while rare, are not dismissed by the team. They are felt, remembered, and discussed in hushed tones. These experiences do not undermine medicine. They illuminate the limits of understanding, the mysteries that persist even in the most precise sciences. Emotionally, viewers experience the duality of this environment. They see the strength and dedication of those who choose this path, the heartbreak that shadows every triumph, and the quiet, haunting moments that defy explanation. The narrative lingers on the subtle gestures of the medical team, a hand on a child's shoulder, a soft word whispered during a procedure, a silent pause in a hallway where life and death have intersected. These moments underscore the humanity at the heart of medicine, the empathy that science alone cannot provide. Ultimately, this section reinforces the documentary's central tension. Life and death, logic and mystery, certainty and wonder exist side by side in the hospital's corridors. Emma's story, her cryptic promise, and the inexplicable signs left in her wake serve as a mirror for the medical team, a reminder that while their knowledge is vast, some experiences belong to realms beyond understanding. And as Dr. Harper reflects quietly on the shadows, the echoes, and the enduring presence of a child who left too soon, the audience is left to ponder the fragile, haunting intersection of science, emotion, and the unknown. The hospital corridors were quiet now. The frantic pace of life and death momentarily slowed. Sunlight streamed through high windows, casting long, soft beams across the linoleum floors, illuminating dust motes that seemed to drift like tiny spirits. Dr. Harper returned to room 214, now emptied of its monitors and IV lines, but filled in memory with the presence of Emma, her laughter, her small voice, her whispered promise, "I'll be back tomorrow." That simple sentence, spoken with unwavering certainty, lingered in the room like an uninvited guest, haunting and impossible to forget. The audience is invited to feel that weight, to step into the quiet tension of memory and mystery. Emma's parents speak softly of her enduring presence even after her passing. They describe the ways they still sense her: footsteps in the hallway that vanish when looked at, a faint warmth lingering on her favorite blanket, moments when they swear her laughter echoes in the house. These anecdotes are tender, filled with both sorrow and a strange comfort, revealing a family trying to navigate the impossible, grief interwoven with the undeniable sense that their child's essence has not vanished entirely. Cinematic storytelling captures this with lingering shots of her empty room, sunlight falling across her belongings, and the gentle sway of a mobile above her bed. Emotion hangs in the air, heavy, yet fragile, like the memory of a voice that refuses to leave. Dr. Harper reflects on how this case reshaped his understanding of life and death. He explains that medicine, despite its power, does not hold all the answers. The limits of science become clear when confronted with the inexplicable, the moments that defy logic, yet feel undeniably real. He wonders aloud whether consciousness might exist beyond the physical body, whether the essence of a person can linger in ways that machines and tests cannot measure. These reflections are thoughtful, measured, and deeply human, inviting viewers to confront their own assumptions about mortality, spirit, and the delicate boundary between them. The narration emphasizes that Emma's story is not only a tale of tragic loss, but also one of hope, courage, and the enduring mysteries of human life. Her whispered promise, once a haunting enigma, now serves as a symbol, a reminder that even in the face of death there are moments of profound insight, unexplainable connection, and love that persists beyond the confines of the body. Cinematic imagery accentuates this by sunlight cutting through half-closed blinds, dust motes dancing in quiet rays, and the shadows of hospital corridors stretching long and empty. Each visual underscores the fragile beauty and haunting uncertainty of life. As the documentary nears its close, Dr. Harper pauses at the doorway one last time, gazing into the room that once held both life and extraordinary mystery. He reflects on the paradox that defines pediatric oncology, the coexistence of science and wonder, of precision and unpredictability, of loss and enduring presence. Emma's story is not neatly resolved, nor is it meant to be. It lingers, like a question whispered in the dark, challenging the audience to consider the boundaries of understanding, the limits of medical certainty, and the possibility that some promises, some presences cannot be measured, contained, or explained. The final words echo gently, leaving viewers with a haunting sense of awe and reflection. Could consciousness extend beyond the fragile vessel of the body? Are some children, some lives meant to teach us that the line between life and something beyond is thinner than we dare to imagine? Emma's laughter, her courage, and her cryptic promise remain, suspended in memory, unresolved, and hauntingly beautiful. In the silence of the empty hospital room, her presence persists, an invitation to believe, to question, and to feel the mysterious, delicate pulse of a world that medicine cannot fully explain.